My father always believed that money was the only way to judge a person's value. He thought the more money you had, the more you were worth. On the day I left home, he showed me just how little he thought I was worth. He looked at me with anger, threw $200 on the floor, and said, "That's all a failure like you deserves." I was 23 years old, had just finished college, and earned an engineering degree. My parents didn't even come to my graduation. I stood in the large living room of our house, holding my single suitcase. Everything I owned was in that bag. I watched the money fall to the shiny marble floor like leaves falling from a tree. The room around me was full of signs of wealth: crystal chandeliers, expensive furniture, and paintings that cost more than most people make in a year. It was all old money, and even older pride. For many generations, the men in my family had all been investment bankers. Each son followed his father into the family business, Mescal and Sons Investment Group. But I broke that chain. I didn't want to spend my life in a tall office building making rich people even richer. When I told my father I wanted to study engineering, he was furious. "Engineering," he said like it was a dirty word. "Engineers are just fancy mechanics. No son of mine is going to waste his life fixing machines." But I saw something he didn't. While he and the rest of the family focused on money and stocks, I saw that the future belonged to technology. I believed the next great ideas and big companies wouldn't come from banks. They would come from people working in small labs and garages, building new things and solving real problems. I wanted to be one of those people. As I stood there, ready to leave, my mother stood by the stairs holding a drink, even though it was still morning. "Paul, dear," she said, "you still have time to change your mind. Come back to the company. Your father can fix this." I looked at her closely. Her smile looked fake, just like always. Growing up, I saw her try to make herself feel better by buying bigger and bigger diamond rings. But no matter how many she had, it was never enough. "No, Mom," I said. "I'm done trying to live your dream." My father's face turned red with anger. I had seen that look many times. "Then get out," he yelled. "You are no longer part of this family. Forget the trust fund. Forget the connections. You are throwing your future away for some silly dream." But to me, it wasn't a silly dream. It was my future, and for the first time, it felt like mine alone. I bent down and picked up the $200. The bills were fresh and new. He had probably told his assistant to get them from the bank just for this dramatic moment. It was his way of being cruel without saying much. "Keep the trust fund," I said as I put the money into my wallet. "I'll build something of my own." My father laughed loudly. His voice echoed through the large room with its high ceiling. "You? Build something?" he said, shaking his head. "You can't even dress properly." He pointed at my plain button-down shirt and slacks, which looked simple compared to his fancy, custom-made suit. "Without the Mescal name, you are nothing," he added. Those words stayed with me for years. I heard them in my head during sleepless nights and during hard times when I wanted to give up. But at that moment, I didn't let them break me. I just smiled and said, "Watch me." I walked out of that giant house with only $200, one suitcase, and my engineering degree, something my family thought was useless. Behind me, the tall iron gates of my childhood home closed with a loud, heavy sound. That was it. I was on my own. Standing on the sidewalk, I realized I didn't have a car. It was in my father's name. I also didn't have a place to stay. My college apartment had been paid for by the trust fund, and now I had only $200 to my name. But I had something more important, something they never understood. I had a dream for the future, and the skills to make it real. I walked to the bus station and bought a one-way ticket to San Diego for $40. I spent another $20 on a burger and fries. Sitting in a small, greasy diner, I watched the buses come and go. I pulled out my notebook and wrote down 3 promises to myself. 1. I will never use the Mescal name to get ahead. 2. I will build something that changes the world. 3. If I ever return, it will be on my own terms. I had $100 left. It wasn't enough to rent a place. It was barely enough to buy food for a few days. But I still had my laptop, my college degree, and most important of all, an idea. While everyone was talking about clean energy like solar and wind, I had noticed a big problem. These energy sources were becoming cheaper, but there was no good way to store the power they created. Batteries were still too expensive and didn't work well enough. I knew if I could solve that problem, I could help the world and prove to my family that I was never worthless. I had come up with a new idea for a type of energy storage system. It was just a design on paper, but it had the power to change the whole energy industry. The only problem was that building it would take millions of dollars, many years of work, and tools I didn't have. My college professors said the idea was smart but not possible. My father said it was just a fantasy, but I believed in it. To me, it was my future. As the bus left the station, I looked out the window and watched my hometown fade into the night. I had spent 23 years trying to be the son my parents wanted. Now it was time to become the man I wanted to be. At the time, I had no idea that this trip, with just $200 in my pocket, would start a journey that would change the world. In 11 years, I would build a company worth billions, change how the world used and stored energy, and return home, not as a failure, but as someone they never expected me to become. But first, I had to survive in San Diego with only $100 left and a dream that wouldn't go away. San Diego wasn't the shiny place full of high-tech success that I had imagined. On my first night, I slept on a park bench in Chula Vista. I used my laptop bag as a pillow and my jacket as a blanket. It was cold and uncomfortable. The next morning, I bought a coffee and a bagel at a small cafe. That cost me $40, leaving only $60 in my pocket. I sat there for hours, using their free Wi-Fi, trying to plan my next move. The barista behind the counter noticed me. "You're going to get robbed sleeping out there," she said. Her name was Emma. She could have asked me to leave, but instead, she made me an offer. "Our espresso machine always breaks," she said. "If you can fix it, you can sleep in the storage room at night." I said yes, right away. I fixed the machine in just 30 minutes. The cafe owner was so happy, he gave me a part-time job doing small repair jobs around the place. Just like that, I had a little money and a place to sleep, even if that place was a room full of coffee beans and paper cups. During the day, I worked at the cafe. At night, I worked on my idea. I didn't have much, but I had what I needed: hope, a place to rest, and a goal that kept me going. I worked on improving my energy storage designs using the cafe's free Wi-Fi. I spent hours reading about patents and new technology trends. Emma, the barista who had helped me, would sometimes bring me leftover pastries. She often looked at my drawings and asked smart questions that actually helped me think more clearly. "So, you're building a better battery?" she asked one night. "Not exactly," I said, showing her my sketches. "Normal batteries lose a lot of energy when they store and send power. My design uses a new kind of material that could store energy with almost no loss, almost 99.9% efficiency." She stared at the drawings. "Then why hasn't anyone else done this?" "Because most people think it's impossible," I said with a smile. "But I think I've found a way." After 4 months of working at the cafe, I had saved enough money to rent a small room in a shared house. I lived with 5 other people, all trying to make it in the tech world. The room was tiny, but it had a desk where I could work. That was all I needed. I also started doing small freelance jobs, helping local tech startups solve engineering problems. That's how I met Kevin Hart. I had just helped his company fix a serious issue with their hardware. "Your solution saved us months of work," Kevin told me. "What else are you working on?" I paused for a second, unsure if I should tell him. But then I took a chance. I showed him my energy storage designs. Kevin looked at the drawings for a long time. He didn't say a word at first. Finally, he said, "This could change everything. But you'll need real funding to build a working model." "I know," I said. I didn't tell him that I had walked away from a rich family and a trust fund. I just said, "I'm working on it." Kevin turned out to be more than just another client. He introduced me to Dr. Rachel Wise, a top researcher at Southern California University who specialized in molecular engineering. She spent 7 hours asking me tough questions, trying to find mistakes in my idea. At the end, she said, "It's a bold idea, maybe even impossible. But if it works," she paused. "I know people at Berkeley's Energy Research Center. Would you be interested in using their lab? Would I be interested? That was one of the best research labs in the world. I stayed calm and said, yes, I'd be very interested. For the next year, I worked 4 different jobs. In the mornings, I did maintenance at the cafe. During the day, I worked freelance jobs. In the evenings, I did research in the Berkeley lab. Late at night, I kept improving my design. It was hard, but I was getting closer to making my dream real. I survived on energy drinks and pure determination. Then, the breakthrough came. It was 4 a.m. in the Berkeley lab. I had been testing different ways to arrange molecules for weeks, trying to find the perfect design to store energy. I ran another test, and when the results came back, I looked at them 4 times. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. It worked. The prototype stored energy with 97.9% efficiency. That meant almost no energy was lost. It was something many people said couldn't be done. Dr. Wise checked the results herself. This isn't just a big step, she said, staring at the numbers. This could change everything. Within a week, I had meetings set up with 3 big venture capital firms. Kevin helped me get my pitch ready, and Emma came over every night to help me practice. She asked tough questions to prepare me so my answers would be strong and clear. The first 2 firms said almost the same thing. The idea was brilliant, but too risky. The third meeting was different. This technology could completely change how we store renewable energy, said Nicholas Holt, the lead investor at Quantum Ventures. But why should we trust a 24-year-old no one's ever heard of? I looked him in the eye and said, because I've spent the last year proving that impossible things can be done. Let me prove one more. They said yes. They invested $10 million in exchange for 30% of my new company. I named it Nova Energy Systems. The name was a small joke to myself, a new star rising out of nothing. I moved the work to our own lab, hired a small team of smart engineers, and worked harder than ever. There were many problems. Some days, everything went wrong. Some nights, I thought we would fail. But we didn't give up. 3 years later, we finished our first full-size energy storage system. We ran tests, and the results were better than we had even hoped. Our system could store and deliver energy with 98.9% efficiency. That was more than 4 times better than the best technology in the market. Suddenly, the whole energy world took notice. With our system, solar and wind power weren't just clean, they were now cheaper and better than fossil fuels. Every major power company wanted to use our tech. For years after the first investment, Nova Energy Systems went public. On the first day, our stock price doubled. By the end of the week, my share of the company was worth over $200 million. It all started with a dream, a notebook, and $200. I bought my first suit since leaving home. It wasn't from the expensive tailor my father used, but from a shop that made suits for tech executives. Emma, now the head of operations at my company, helped me pick it out. Trying to impress someone, she asked with a smile. No, I said, adjusting the jacket. I think it's time to visit home. I hadn't spoken to my parents in 6 years, but I had kept up with news about them through business articles and social media. Mescal and Sons Investment Group, the family company, was in trouble. Traditional investment banking was falling behind. New financial technology and changing markets were taking over. They had refused to change when I told them to, and now they were paying the price. They were also facing a big threat, a hostile takeover from a powerful tech-focused investment firm. What they didn't know was that the firm, Digital Horizon Capital, was owned by Nova Energy Systems, my company. I booked a flight home. I was now worth hundreds of millions, a big change from the $200 I had left with. But I wasn't going back to get even or show off. I was going back to buy the company that once told me I had no value. Before I left, Emma saw me looking at an old family photo. Are you sure you want to do this? She asked. I put the photo away. They taught me that money is what matters most. It's time I show them exactly what I'm worth. What I didn't know was how deeply this return would affect my family. I didn't expect how emotional it would be or how complicated things would become. That $200 lesson they gave me? It was about to cost them everything. The Mescal and Sons office building looked the same, tall and serious, made of stone, with big gold letters out front. It still felt cold and proud, like it didn't belong in the modern world. But this time, I didn't walk in as the son they were ashamed of. I walked in as the CEO of the company trying to take theirs. "Mr. Walker, here to see the board," I told the front desk, using the name I had gone by since leaving home. The receptionist nodded and sent me to the top floor. She didn't recognize me. She didn't realize the son they had pushed away had returned. And upstairs, in that same boardroom where my father once laughed at my dreams, everything was about to change. I remembered the dark wooden walls, the old oil paintings of past chairmen, and the family crest carved above the fireplace. As a kid, I used to play under the big table in that very room, listening to my father make deals and defeat his business rivals. Now I was sitting at the head of that table, waiting. One by one, the board members and company leaders walked in. Then my father entered. He looked much older than I remembered. His strong presence had faded. The years had not been kind. He didn't notice me at first. His eyes passed right over me as he took his seat. "Gentlemen," I said, "I'm here on behalf of Digital Horizon Capital to talk about our offer to buy Mescal and Sons. We're not interested in being bought by some tech startup," my father snapped, still not realizing who I was. "Mescal and Sons has stood strong for 100 years. And it will fall in 5 if it doesn't change," I replied, dropping the calm voice I had been using. I let my real voice come through. "Isn't that right, Father?" The room went completely silent. My father's face changed. First red with anger, then pale as he finally recognized me. "Paul," he said quietly. "Hello, Father," I answered. "Miss me?" One of the board members, Mr. Timothy, who had known me since I was a boy, squinted and said, "Little Paul Mescal?" "Actually, it's Paul Walker now," I said. "And I'm here to talk about the future of this company." My father looked shocked, then angry. This is a trick. You work for Digital Horizon." I smiled. "No, Father. I own Digital Horizon. It's part of Nova Energy Systems." I watched their faces change as they realized what that meant. "Yes," I continued, "that Nova Energy Systems. The company that changed how the world stores and uses energy." "Impossible," my father whispered. "You left with nothing." "No," I said softly. "I left with $200, your final lesson about the value of money. Would you like to know what that $200 bought?" I nodded to my assistant, who handed out folders to each board member. Nova Energy Systems is now worth $8.4 billion. Digital Horizon Capital, which you didn't even research properly, is our investment branch. Over the last year, we've quietly bought shares of Mescal and Sons through different companies and hidden groups. I had returned not as a son begging for approval, but as the man who now controlled a company that once called him worthless. I opened the folder in front of me. "As of this morning, we own 55% of your company's shares. We also own most of your company's debt, which is a lot, especially with the troubles you've had lately." My father's face went pale as he finally understood everything. The son he once pushed away had come back, not for forgiveness, but to take control. "The offer is simple," I continued. "Mescal and Sons will become part of Digital Horizon. The family name will be retired. The board of directors will be removed." I paused and looked straight at my father. "And you will step down, starting today." "You can't do this," he said, almost choking on his words. "This is the family legacy." "The family legacy is already dying," I said sharply. "Your investment ideas are outdated. Your tools and systems are old. And your pride has stopped you from seeing how the world is changing. I tried to warn you 6 years ago," I added, "but you didn't listen." Mr. Timothy, the board member who had known me since I was a kid, spoke up. "Paul, can't we talk about this? You're still a Mescal." "No," I said firmly. "You all made it very clear that I stopped being a Mescal the day I chose to build something new instead of staying stuck in the past. I'm not here to make peace. I'm here to do business." I stood up and fixed my custom suit, the one that cost more than that $200 I had left home with hundreds of times over. "You have 12 hours to accept the offer," I said. "If you say no, Digital Horizon will demand all your unpaid loans right away. Mescal and Sons won't survive the week. My father finally found his voice again. You would destroy your own family's company? Everything we built. No, father. I replied calmly. You destroyed it. You destroyed it by refusing to grow, to change, and to listen. I'm giving you a chance to save what's left, your workers, your clients, and the legacy you claim to care so much about. But whether that legacy keeps the Mescal name, that's not up to you anymore. I walked toward the door, then turned back one last time. Oh, and father, I said, remember when you told me that money is the only way to measure a man's worth? I let the words hang in the air. Now he understood exactly what that lesson had cost him. I gave a cold smile. By your own rules, what am I worth now? The next 24 hours went by in a rush of legal meetings and questions from the press. News about Nova Energy Systems taking over caused chaos in the stock market. Mescal and Sons shares dropped fast. My father didn't give up easily. He tried calling old friends and business partners, hoping someone would come to his rescue. But I had already planned for that. Every possible way out was blocked. Everyone he thought might help was already working with us. No more loans. No more support. The company he had spent his whole life building now belonged to me. The next day, they signed the papers. It happened in the same room where my father had once thrown $200 at my feet. While the lawyers were finishing the paperwork, my father walked up to me. He looked tired and defeated, but in his eyes, I saw something else. Maybe respect, or maybe he had just given up. You planned all this, he said quietly. From the start. No, father, I said. You did. You planned at the moment you decided my dreams weren't worth believing in. I just built something better than you ever imagined. He nodded slowly. And now are you going to destroy everything just to get revenge? I looked at him for a long moment. No. I'm going to rebuild it into something that actually matters. Mescal and Sons will now be part of a company that's helping solve the world's energy problems, not just moving money around. The fact that it's no longer yours, that's just a fitting ending. As I turned to leave, he called out, Paul, that $200? I smiled. Best investment I ever made, father. It taught me exactly who I didn't want to become. It took 7 months to fully change the company. I restructured everything, modernized the systems, hired new people, and shifted the company's focus to green energy and sustainable investments. Most employees kept their jobs. This wasn't about getting revenge on them. They weren't the ones who had doubted me. My father retired to the old family estate. His pride was hurt more than his wallet. I made sure he had enough money to live comfortably. My mother reached out several times. She talked about wanting to make peace, about starting fresh. But I kept my distance. Some bridges, once burned, are better left as ashes. 1 year later, I stood in my office at Nova Energy Systems, looking out over San Diego. Emma walked in with a small package that had just arrived. It was from my father. Inside was $200, the same bills he had thrown at me 6 years earlier. I had left them on his desk after signing the takeover papers. There was also a note. It said, "You were worth more than I knew." I took the bills back to the cafe where everything had started. The same place where I had once slept in the storage room. The barista who gave me shelter back then was now a senior leader in my company. But the cafe still made the best coffee in Chula Vista. I ordered a coffee and left the $200 as a tip. Some people might say I was being petty, using my success to take over my father's company. But I didn't do it for revenge. I did it because sometimes the only way to fix something broken is to tear it down and build something better. They say money can't buy happiness. But that $200 taught me something even more important. A person's true worth isn't measured by how much money they have or by their family name. It's measured by what they choose to build with what they're given. I built an entire company, a whole new path, and a new life. And I did it not because of the Mescal name, but in spite of it. The $200 I left home with gave me something priceless. The freedom to become who I was always meant to be. The millions I earned later? They were just proof that I was right all along. And that, to me, is worth more than any family fortune.